which stands for a patient-specific microstructural and radiobiological model for personalized external beam radiation therapy in localized tumors. So I applied to the call for the DRC starting grant in 2023 under the panel PE8, which stands for Products and Process Engineering, with the main keywords was industrial bioengineering, essentially because I'm a bioengineer. My field of study is radiotherapy, with a focus on personalized radiotherapy. And in this field, the main gap is the absence of patient-specific microstructural and radiobiological models that can be used for treatment optimization and adaptation. My vision was to propose a paradigm shift in the planning and subsequent adaptation of the radiotherapy treatment by implementing biologically guided radiotherapy treatments. The breakthrough idea that is at the core of my project is to develop a clinically compatible patient-specific model, which is able to describe the microscopic characteristic of the tumor and its interaction with the radiation beam. So the key turning points that allowed me to envision and then write the ERC project mainly roots in my background. So essentially, my perspective. So specifically, I changed both the target and also the scale at which I was working. So essentially, I perform a conceptual shift and I changed the target by moving from advanced modeling of the patient anatomy for motion management to advanced modeling of tumor microenvironment through simulations. And then I also changed the scale. So during my PhD and postdoc, I was mainly implementing image processing strategies that were working at the voxel scale, so at the millimeter scale. And the idea was to move from the millimeter scale down to the micrometer. Then, when I decided to write the DRC, I also wanted to highlight my interdisciplinarity. So, being a bioengineering mainly involved also the interaction with other figures, such as medical physics and also clinicians, including radiologists and radiation oncologists. So, I decided to put all these characteristics within my project in the different component of the project. So specifically, the simulation part of the project covers the bioengineering field and also medical physics. Then the aspect of personalization is something related to application in radiology and radiation oncology. And also for the validation, I included aspect of biology and radiobiology. So since I'm not a clinician and my experience in radiobiology at that time was quite limited, I also decided to include in the project the collaboration with some clinical partners. So what made the project a winner? So essentially, I just wanted to give you some objective feedback as well as some personal considerations. So for what concerns objective feedback are essentially the evaluation that I got from the reviewers of my proposal. So essentially, they evaluated the groundbreaking nature and the potential impact of my project, and they also evaluated the scientific approach. So they looked if the methodology was solid and if I had a feasible plan. They also look at the risk-benefit analysis and also at the interdisciplinary nature of my project. And also they evaluated me as a principal investigator, looking at my track record and also at my international collaborations. I also have to admit that my host institution played also a relevant role in the success of the project, also because they give me a lot of support during both writing and also for the preparation of the interview. Indeed, the research service of Politecnico di Milano allowed me to access also to external consultancy to improve the proposal and also to simulate two mock interviews with some experts that were really useful for the interview that I had with the European Commission. And then obviously at work, so to write a project, especially for an ERC starting grant, you have to be very focused on your proposal. You have to be determined in all the process because it's a very hard work. And also for the interview, you have to practice a lot. So the things that I would like to share with you is, first of all, not to underestimate the time that is required to prepare the proposal. Actually, this aspect is, from my point of view, very subjective. Indeed, so the research service at Politecnico di Milano told me that you should consider around 1 year for writing the proposal, but in my case, I took 3-4 months in writing the proposal. So this because I decided at the end, so very close to the deadline, to apply to the call, and also because I know myself and I know that I'm more productive in a very short deadline with respect to spread the writing of the project over 1 year. Then, when you are writing your proposal, you have to be very clear and simple, and you have to prioritize clarity over perfection, because you have to consider that reviewers that are reading your proposal cannot be maybe not expert in your field. So you need to be very clear and very simple in what you are explaining. If you are planning to consider some partners to be included in the project, choose them carefully, because I mean their involvement can introduce a significant administrative work. In the sense that if you get your project accepted, you need then to prepare contracts with these institutions and I mean, to manage all the interactions with different institutions. Then also, if you are planning to include patient data, as for example in my case, I also suggest, if possible, to anticipate the ethics document, also because in this case, I mean, they required time to be processed. And also, you should be prepared that if your project is accepted, the EU will also add some ethical deliverables in addition to the scientific deliverables that you have in your project. Then one advantage of the ERC is that you can also request an extra budget. This is something that I didn't in my project, but if I would change it now, probably I would think it more carefully, because it's something that can essentially give you additional budget to support your research, but obviously this needs to be properly explained and justified. And also the other suggestion is to check the panel members. So for the ERC, for all the call, I mean, there's the panel members that change every 2 years, and you can check essentially who are they, and see their profile and check if their profile is also aligned with what you are doing. So if your grant is not accepted, then don't be sad because there are alternative options. So what I did in the past was so before the ERC I applied 2 times to a national funding in Italy. So it's a fund from the Italian Association for Research Against Cancer that provide fundings also for young researcher. So I did my first try just after my PhD, and the topic was organ motion management because my background was on that, and the project was rejected. Then I got a second try where I applied for patient-specific modeling, but more focused at the macroscopic scale. Also, in this case, it got rejected, but then we decided to write again the project, improve it according to the reviewer feedback, and then it got accepted as an investigator grant. Then the ERC, when I applied to the ERC, luckily it was accepted at the first round, but if your project is not accepted, I would suggest you to try again. Because especially for ERC, the reviewers will give you a lot of comments, and so you can think carefully about what you did and what you wrote in your project. But lately, you have to be very careful about the new guidelines because I read that the ERC are starting to be more strict in reconsider project that has been already submitted. And obviously, of course, you have a lot of alternatives. One of them is, of course, for young researchers, the possibility to apply to Marie Curie projects, which also support mobility to other institutions. So I hope to have covered all the aspects, and now I just want to show you the presentation that I did during my interview at the European Research Council Commission. So the interview took at that time 5 minutes, so they were quite strict with the time. And so if you don't mind, I'm planning to actually read the talk that I did because as I mentioned you before, so working on the presentation was very hard work, and also preparing the talk that cover all the aspects and was within the 5 minutes was very, a strong work. So the talk that I did is as follow, and this also allow you to show my research and the project that I'm currently conducting. So, good morning, I'm Chiara Paganelli, Assistant Professor at Politecnico di Milano, and I'm glad to present you my ERC project. In the fight against cancer, external beam radiotherapy represents the best practice care for approximately 50% of all cancer cases, but treatment outcome is highly dependent on the tumor biologies. This because from one side, precision is technology-driven, and we dispose of advanced radiotherapy units to achieve an optimal patient-specific geometrical irradiation of the tumor. However, on the other hand, tumor biology is elusive in current treatment planning. Indeed, the biological models used to tune and adapt the dose to be delivered as a function of the expected tumor control probability are not patient-specific. Standard in vitro models, in vitro cells irradiations, and more rigorous Monte Carlo simulations are generalistic, with Monte Carlo simulations also being too computationally demanding for the clinical practice. My vision is thus to bridge this scientific gap by proposing a paradigm shift in the planning and subsequent adaptation of the radiotherapy treatment. The breakthrough idea consists in a novel modellistic framework based on a clinically compatible patient-specific model able to describe the microscopic characteristic of the tumor and its interaction with the radiation beam. In this way, I will account not only for tumor geometry, but also for tumor microstructure and radiobiology of each patient. This will allow developing biologically guided treatments with individual dose schemes and sculpting of the dose, in contrast to current generalistic approaches and homogeneous dose distribution. To achieve this, I will integrate a set of multidisciplinary activities which will be conducted in 4 interconnected work packages. I will implement a Monte Carlo platform to simulate tumor microstructure and radiation damage that will be integrated with the fast artificial intelligence and images acquired on patients. I will then personalize the microstructural and radiobiological models, which will be finally validated in a dedicated work package. The core of the project is the development of the tumor model starting from in silico cellular substrates. Here, diffusion magnetic resonance signals of water molecules will be simulated to describe tumor microstructure, whereas simulations of radiation tissue interaction to generate data of radiation damage. This simulation will be speed up by exploiting artificial intelligence. The personalization of the model will be granted relying on diffusion signal retrieved from diffusion magnetic resonance images acquired on patients. The tumor will be then finally validated, relying on patient-specific histological samples within a dedicated pipeline, which I'm currently investigating, as well as in vitro cells irradiation. I will manage and supervise the project with a team of postdoc and PhD students with different skills. The clinical activities will be supported by 2 collaborating clinical institutions and by an advisory board of 4 expert clinicians. The project will also benefit from my following experiences: my collaboration in diffusion MRI, which will be extended to radiation damage, my role as a principal investigator in a project on artificial intelligence in collaboration with CERN, my activities in Taylor, which we exploit multiparametric imaging, and finally, my leadership in the European project Raptor, where we aim at implementing geometric online strategies with a vision towards biological adaptation. The expected result is the development of a patient-specific tumor model embedded in a scalable simulation platform, useful to advance knowledge and technology in bioengineering. The project will also have an impact on other fields, such as medical physics, radiobiology, radiology, and radiation oncology, towards the development of biologically targeted treatments. With this biological targeting, will be integrated in advanced radiotherapy units. We will be able to take the most of the advantages of this system towards improve patient care. Thank you for your attention, and I'm now ready for your questions. So maybe I can stop sharing.
Yes, that sounds good.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much for the interesting presentation. I'm particularly impressed with how much you managed to squeeze into those 5 minutes.
Okay.
We have a few minutes for questions, so I will read out as many as I can from the chat. To the audience, please feel free to add any additional questions you might have to the chat as well, and I will try my best to get around to many of them if I can. First question from the audience was personal grant versus larger grant with collaborations. What is the best way to start as a postdoc?
Yes, I would say for a postdoc, I would suggest a personal grant rather than a large grant with collaborations, because it's also much more easier to manage during the project itself.
Yeah, I guess that makes a lot of sense. If you have more control, probably the better, especially early on.
Yeah.
Another question we received was, did someone from your institution help with all of the bureaucracy, ethics approval, etc.? Or did you have to figure all of this out yourself on top of the actual science?
No, so actually, my institution helped me a lot. So we have both an ethical department as well as an ethical legal department that helped me with the contracts with the other institutions, and also the clinical institution itself helped me in the preparation of all the documents that were useful for the ethical approval. So, I mean, the work was quite exhausting because I mean, it's not a science, it's not fancy as a science, but at the same time, it's something that you have to learn if you are conducting a project. So, yes. And I had the collaboration of both my institution as well as the collaborating clinical partners.
Mm. Related to that, since your institution was very supportive, how important do you think the research institution, the infrastructure you mentioned, and the support are versus how much of it can be the own initiative of the applicant?
Well, I think that for projects such as an ERC, the help from my institution was very, I mean, important. Maybe for smaller grant, I mean, also in that case, for smaller grant, my institution is not so involved. I mean, it's something that you manage on your own. But for this kind of grant, I would say that the help of my institution was really important. So, both for as mentioned before, so the external consulting was useful because they also helped me to see the project also on a different perspective. I mean, not just my own research, but explaining also to others, which is not in my field, what I was planning to do. So they help me a lot in the clarity of the project as well as on the structure. And also, have to say and to admit that so at the beginning I was a little bit scared when my institution asked me to organize and help me in organizing this mock interview. But at the end, I have to admit that they were really useful. So essentially, we select some experts in my field that were not within my institution. So some of them were of my institution, others from external institutions, also with some ERC grantee in this mock interview. And I would say that they help me a lot in simulating the interview and
Mm.
suggest me some they give me some advice both on the presentation as well as on the reply to the questions. So, yeah.
That seems incredibly helpful. I guess any question that comes up in a mock interview like that is a question you're prepared for in the actual interview,
Yeah.
right? And I
Yeah,
also, yeah.
not just from a scientific point of view, so not just in terms of the content of the question, but also on the ability to reply in a specific time to the question, because you don't have also to be very, I mean, to give a very long reply to the question, but and also very short, so you have to find a trade-off.
Mm. And I assume when it comes to, say, external advisors to read your proposal, I guess it's like any writing, right? The more you work on it yourself, the more you just sort of glance over it when you continue working on it. So getting that fresh perspective from someone else must be really, really valuable.
Yes, I totally agree.
Um,
Especially if it's not of your field, so if it's someone external. So yeah.
mhm. Another question from the audience was, how many years post PhD were you when you decided to apply for an ERC grant? Was it always in your plans, or did your supervisor help push you towards it?
Okay, so I got my PhD in 2016, and and then I applied in 2022 for the call of the 2023. So some years later. Um, was it my plans? I don't know. And it was mainly my supervisor pushing me because so I had the idea in mind, but I was a little bit scared because I mean, the ERC starting grant, it's a quite big project with so the percentage of success is quite limited, so I was not so positive that the grant was accepted. So yeah, it pushed me a lot on that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Probably a little bit difficult to say yourself when one actually feels ready to apply for especially something that big, because I assume to some extent you never really feel ready,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So I
Yes,
guess
I totally agree.
to some extent you probably always have to be pushed. One question referred to adapting your patient-specific modeling project proposal after rejection. How important is it to refine something that is already quite strong versus trying to really expand it considerably to make it more appealing, especially after an initial rejection?
Okay, so I mean, when so I had this experience for with the national grant. So when it was rejected, actually for that national grant, reviewer didn't give me a lot of feedback. So it was just trying to improve it, making it more clear, and also including some preliminary activities that to show that were able I mean, to do that project.
Hmm.
But yeah, I would say that instead with the ERC, I got a lot of feedback from the reviewers, more feedback than the national grant that I applied before. But then, so the ERC got accepted, so I didn't have to think about remanage the project. But I would say that the comment from the panelist member of the ERC were very punctual, and so I would say that if you get a rejection in an ERC application, I'm quite confident that you can get all the proper feedback from the panel members.
Ah, yeah, okay. So in a way, also sort of an opportunity, even though it gets rejected,
Yeah,
if you get really helpful comments, it gives you the opportunity to really strengthen it as well.
yeah.
And we have one more minute, but so I think I'll try to squeeze in one final question there, if I
Okay.
may, about prioritizing clarity over perfection. Your research focus is quite wide-ranging. In, for example, grant writing, how do you manage to keep the balance between communicating your work clearly while also doing its scope justice?
Okay, so this is a quite difficult question. So I would say that so my answer is try is so when I was writing the project, one other feedback that I got from my supervisor was also to like try to explain things as you are explaining them to our kids. So, I mean, this doesn't mean that you have to reduce the scientific content of your project, which for sure must be clear and must be scientifically relevant. But at the same time, you have to be able to properly explain it in a clear way so that also people that are not of your field can understand what you have in mind.
Hmm. Yeah, that is sort of an art, it seems to be, be it in grant writing or papers or conference presentations,
Yes, but I
making
think
something.
that is also something that you learn during the process. So it's something that, as you said, like for papers and also for conferences where you have to explain in an oral presentation in 10 minutes what you have done. So it's something that you learn with the year.
That's reassuring. Yeah, and I know you have some activities scheduled for afterwards, so I don't want to keep you any longer, but thank you so much for both the interesting presentation, but also for taking the time to answer all of the questions. We really
Okay,
appreciate it.
so thank you for the opportunity. And if there are young researchers that wants to contact me for additional question, I mean, on the presentation there are, I mean, there's my email and there's also our website both for the our lab and also of the ERC project that you can Google and send us a question if you are interested.
That's very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And to make sure we actually run more or less on time for once, we'll have to move on to our second speaker, Katie Lichter. Katie received her Master's of Public Health from Johns Hopkins University in 2019 and her Doctor of Medicine from Loyola University, Chicago in 2020. She completed her radiation oncology residency at the University of California, San Francisco in 2025 and is now an assistant professor at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, as well as a clinical instructor at UCSF. Dr. Lichter's numerous awards and fellowships include serving as an Energy Health Fellow with the UC Carbon Neutrality Initiative, a Climate Health Organizing Fellow with the Harvard-Cambridge Health Alliance, and a Fellow in the US Department of Health and Human Services Office of Climate Change and Health Equity. Her work focuses on environmental sustainability, climate resilience, and improving the quality and equity of cancer care. Katie, whenever you're ready.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for the kind introduction and also for having me here this morning. A big and wonderful presentation to follow up to. So very much enjoyed learning about your work as well. I'm just going to share my screen here. Can I get a quick head nod or a thumbs
Yes,
up
looks
if you can
perfect.
see my screen? Great. Wonderful. So this morning, just briefly going to talk about some of the research that I've done, and then some of the funding that I found to be very helpful in approach to that, especially when focusing on what may be an innovative, what is an innovative area of research, and how to bring everything together. So most of my work is focused on environmental sustainability and climate resilience. And I'll touch a little bit today on some of the work that we're doing in proton therapy as well, just because that's fun and exciting. But why does this matter? And why is a radiation oncologist sitting here at the intersection of cancer care and climate change? A couple of reasons is, first and foremost is that the WHO has actually declared climate change the single greatest public health challenge of the 21st century. And I really realized that this was going to be a challenge within cancer care, even within the earliest days of entering the field and working in the hospital. And I won't go through the whole long story, but essentially saw that, how a global pandemic and also the wildfires within California really could interrupt care and had, more than one patient present with really advanced cancer because they had missed essential weeks of chemotherapy and radiation. And so started to, I think we can all start to make the connections that, a changing climate can not only interrupt access to care, but also can even cause and exacerbate, development of cancer. But simultaneously, healthcare sector is responsible for about 4 to 5% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So actually more than aviation. And when we look at the US, our healthcare sector here is even higher. It's about 8 to 10%. Oncology, very similar to other fields in healthcare sector, oncology is very energy intensive. And with our own delivery of care with our machines and imaging, and even the surgery that's required for patients in their care path, it all contributes significantly. Even the patient transportation for coming for several weeks, sometimes up to 6 to 8 weeks for radiation, certainly adds up. But also that, cancer care is uniquely vulnerable because we require the infrastructure and, a lot energy intensive care and, supply chains to work and patients to be able to access the clinic for weeks on end, as well as the staff. So very vulnerable to extreme weather, from wildfires to flooding, even to high heat. They can really cause system level disruptions, increasing, or threatening patient access, safety, and outcomes. And so, my lab really focuses on the interplay between healthcare delivery and climate change. We focus on building resiliency, so understanding these disruptions of care and how to build more resilient delivery systems. So right now, for example, where I'm at, we're focusing on putting in an early warning system that pulls EMR data and local national weather data to flag at-risk patients for missed visits and helping with rescheduling. We also focus on decarbonizing cancer care, so uh, using methodology that's actually taken from engineering called life cycle assessments to quantify the environmental emissions of care processes. And with that is, to establish a baseline, but then really to say where are hotspots and how can we reduce that? So it's not a matter of we're not going to deliver care. It's a matter of finding the hotspots and focusing on reducing it. And then lastly is to bring forward the patient voice in all of this. We found that patients are concerned about these issues and they are asking, if I go down route A versus B, if it's the same oncologic outcomes, what is less harmful to our environment? So patients are really emerging with strong voices that this matters to them. Not all patients, but that this matters to them. And they may want, to have this um, in their decision-making process. So in my lab, and I think this is just relevant to some of the funding that we have, but a variety of projects, from looking at climate change and outcomes, how does this impact overall survival and long-term outcomes, decarbonization, waste reduction, how do we reduce our waste, especially in the procedures that we do in radiation oncology, such as brachytherapy, doing some of the carbon footprinting, as I discussed, developing low-hanging fruit tools for action. So how can we create change, not just in our institution, but really ripple across radiation, oncology more broadly, and then that resilience. So certainly, over time have tried to focus on two sides of the coin, both how is climate change impacting our patients and their outcomes, but then the flip side, how are we contributing, in cancer care to a changing climate? So this has been a nice portfolio to really diversify. And when it comes to grants, especially in an innovative area, finding what really drives the grant or those funding it, which side do they sit on, and really focusing in on appealing to that. And that's been very helpful, especially as funding has changed a lot in this space within the US, given our political climate. And so I'm going to kind of rush through this, but just wanted to share because I think it's relevant to this group and kind of fun. So I am collaborating with several investigators and especially physicists from several institutions, including Rob Chutter out of the Christie, who's really leading this. And we're looking at the carbon footprint of high and low energy proton beam therapy, looking at a couple of centers across the UK. And so as I mentioned, we know that radiation is resource intensive, and had actually done our first, piece on this was assessing and quantifying the baseline of EBRT for 10 different treatment disease sites, lung, breast, etc. But the question that always came up was, well, what about proton therapy? And so we want to establish in very similar methodology, so we could, compare EBRT to proton therapy, so photons, to protons. The carbon footprint of 4 proton services, identify some of the largest contributing factors. So then this can guide future effective carbon reduction. And then identify some similarities and differences between centers to again uncover some reduction opportunities. Because yes, this had never been done before and really wanted to be able to provide this baseline information. So we looked at 4 different centers, 3 in the UK and 1 in Denmark. We used this robust life cycle assessment methodology and looked at, really from cradle to grave. So throughout the whole process, everything that goes into that, um, and just, electricity, construction, transportation for patient and staff, anesthetic gases, because actually some anesthetic gases are direct greenhouse gas emissions, consumables, and energy. Found a difference here. I won't dive into this right now because it's not the focus of this talk, but certainly, significant differences between our high energy centers and our low energy centers. And again, we broke down electricity versus construction versus transportation. We see that continuously transportation has factored significantly into, in addition to electricity, which we knew, transportation has continuously factored a significant proportion, which is, a unique discussion, especially when we start thinking about hypofractionation and the opportunities that exist within our field. Um, and so, we had found that energy is a dominant factor here. And so finding opportunities to both work with industry partners to reduce some of that energy. It's been found, especially even powering down overnight on the weekends, or going into a low power mode in between patients can significantly reduce that, and that especially has been done with MRIs. A lot of data exists around that. But then also, having a discussion around opportunities for cleaner energy. Transportation varied by site, especially thinking about where patients are coming from. So, that warrants a discussion around hypofractionation. Otherwise, at this point, not we need patients to come to the clinic, but there are, actions that can be taken again on supporting hypofractionation. And that there certainly are significant differences between proton and LINAC radiotherapy, and proton therapy is certainly more carbon intensive, but you still have to think about, the when it's used appropriately, the additional patient benefit or clinical benefit there. Um, as far as, building a diversified funding portfolio, so this has really been essential for our work in terms of, as we entered a space, really helping to grow this quickly and bring in others. So a lot of, what I focused on was starting with institutional pilot grants, really to do proof of concept, and bring in collaborators and generate that preliminary data. We use publications and pilot data to put out, our proof of concept to publish that pilot data, but then also really use publications within the field, editorials, especially to make an argument for why this matters, and to say where the data exists, being able to share with the field that patients treated during times of hurricanes have worse overall survival. And so that really put us on the map, um, especially nationally within the field, to be able to prime for society grants. Because people started to get to know our work and absolutely reached out. And as it generated more interest from the field, then our professional societies were sort of primed and eager to fund this work. And then to continue in the background to build out national collaborations to strengthen our federal applications. So that has been a big component. And what I mean by that is basically grounding this work in established methodologies. So there's components of implementation science, right? Even though it's maybe an innovative topic and lens to be bringing to cancer care. The methodologies are the same in bringing in those collaborators to bring in their expertise, but also, to it's very important to have them as mentors, more or less backing or bringing validity to your work. For just being an early career individual, I've utilized early career mechanisms to bridge from this pilot funding to federal funding. Um, and just reminding people that of course there's a lot of failures when you're grant funding, but really with each one there's an opportunity to recycle, and allow us for really building the relationships that will sustain over time, and the diversification certainly reduce risks. I've learned a lot about that with having a sensitive subject and topic here in the US. Um, and so, yeah, I think this is kind of the route that I went, no right or wrong way to go, but I would emphasize, diversifying the funding portfolio. Um, and I'm happy to, thank you for the opportunity to share on this, and happy to stay in touch with others as, you're thinking about any component of what I've shared today, whether it's funding or moving forward in terms of an innovative subject or research angle within the field, or even if interested in talking more about the environmental components within cancer care. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the interesting insights. The stat about greenhouse gas emission from healthcare exceeding that of global aviation emissions was kind of flooring. So I very
Yeah.
much appreciated that part.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll just make one small note on that. I found that very shocking because when I had some of these questions, it was, right in the middle of COVID, and I was pulling off all my PPE, and it was a day in San Francisco where we had orange skies because of the wildfires. So I really started questioning, as I pulled off all this PPE, what does waste look like, and are we contributing? Because my partner and I were very interested in, having a more sustainable life and using reusable grocery store bags and small things like that. But I felt like, perhaps the healthcare sector was contributing very little, and that because we deliver essential care, we're exempt from this conversation. But when I found that in the US, it's about 10%. That is very high. That's significant. And so, it really comes down to oftentimes there's things that you can do is, can we just deliver care with better quality, right? Because we actually see, across Europe, uh, countries are delivering higher quality care with lower emissions and lower cost. But that's not new to anyone.
Yeah, but it's a very interesting question also because there are at least some people, right, for whom in their daily life this is quite an important topic. And yet when it comes to certain areas, even areas that on a factual basis are very important areas, we sort of have a blind spot as a society, it
Yeah.
seems.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. And a lot of these things are mutually beneficial. So there's an opportunity to increase our quality while reducing emissions. Mhm.
yeah, definitely. With that, we'll get to some questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the Q&A section, and I will get to as many of them as I can. The first one is a little bit on the longer side and contains sort of
Sure.
two different parts, but I want to read it in full. It says, Dr. Lichter, thank you for such a great talk. This is such a relevant topic for ECRs that we don't hear enough about. First question, do you think there should be a PTCOC subcommittee on the environmental impact of proton therapy?
Yeah, great question. I would love to see that. We have created committees, within Astro, and Astro has a green committee. I really think that this is how we can bring folks together, right? It's a convening place to ask really interesting questions and to move the needle. And it doesn't purely have to be about advocacy, but it also can be, productivity and research. So I think, committees have really elevated this work and allowed for incredible collaborators to come together. So I'm biased, but I think absolutely. And there's multiple reasons, even from the patient lens. If this matters to patients, does that matter, to this group? If so, then it warrants a subcommittee in my mind.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the conference is coming up, so maybe something to push for. The second question from the same attendee is, in your experience, has acquiring federal funding in this area been trickier in the US in recent years?
Um, I think the only thing that's tricky about it is changing the lens, and taking the time to do that. So right, before climate and equity, health equity, we're okay and we're encouraged. But actually, it's really easy in this space, because we're just talking about uh, cancer care outcomes, and overall survival. So in cancer care, timely access to care and completing radiation in a certain package time is essential, especially for our most vulnerable cancers. And so by addressing some of these issues, we are focusing in on ensuring patients have timely access to care. So I think, in terms of moving the needle forward on in this space in cancer care, no, not at all. Because that's something we all continue to get behind. Now, the quantification is a little bit trickier, yes, but that's more a matter of quality improvement, operations efficiency, saving money. So things again that tend to go very well here. It all comes down to, is this a climate issue or is this about our field? I think it's about our fields, and improving our care.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good reminder of how sometimes it's less important what the actual content is and more how one portrays it for a given audience, the same way that you
Yeah.
would when, say, giving a presentation to different audiences as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Another question from the audience was, as a first-year postdoc in the US, when do you think
Mm-hmm.
is the right time to start considering applying for grants? Any advice on coming up with a fundable idea?
Yeah, I think the right time is probably yesterday. So it's always a good time. Even if you don't need the funds or don't need the grant, there's multiple things that come out of funding. And probably I would say the biggest thing is the collaborations, that it brings, and it sort of brings validity and brings structure, to those collaborations. Um, but not oftentimes not essential to have, the funding. It's the structure and the collaborations that could even come from a $5,000-$10,000 grant, can far exceed, right, the money. Um, and I forget what the other part. It was about when to start funding and yes, how to come up. What is a fundable idea? Um, Sure, that's a great question. I think something we all of us many, continue to ask. I would say just like staying open and curious. Staying open and curious and asking questions. And that's really how I found myself in this space, is open and curious. I saw, things presenting in my own clinical space, and started to ask questions. Do we produce waste? What is the impact? Are patient outcomes affected? And it's the same things that, our mentors have said for a long time, is read, and stay curious. But I think, definitely, if there's an area, I think it's nice to, focus, become an expert, outside of your field, become an expert, and talk and engage and read outside of the field and attend lectures and stay curious. Because where we can bridge ourselves with other experts, is where, I think there really exists a lot of fundable ideas.
Mm. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And there are two more questions that I think are sort of
Hmm.
closely related, so I'll just sort of mash them together. One
Okay.
is, how can we as ECRs do more to help address the climate issue in our field? And the other one is, what sort of contributions would you like to see the medical physics community make? Should an environmental assessment be included when medical physicists discuss novel treatment developments like hypofractionation and, for example, compact proton therapy systems?
Yeah, I think, the first thing to, people say, if you want to address climate change, the best thing to do is talk about climate change. And so I think, the best thing to do is to start to think about how can this be a component of the care that we deliver? And is it, a quality component, or how does it fit into your clinic? Medical physicists absolutely have a huge role in this. Apologies if my internet is going out a little bit. But, I think finding additional solutions and opportunities, there is no one solution. It's going to be a variety of solutions. And there is no perfect sort of key. And every solution has a component, right? That isn't, it's not binary. And so it's going to be a spectrum. And I think, as I work more with clinicians, we've started to think about where are our opportunities. And I would say hypofractionation, right, is a clinical decision, but the implementation of that, right, also requires physics. So I'm not in the physics world. I would love to hear more about what physics thinks medical physicists can bring in terms of the solutions. The clinical decision making from the MD, from the physician lens. um, we've continued to put forward some solutions in that way. But I think kind of the ball is in the court for medical physicists. I'm curious to see, from that lens, what are the solutions? And so, yes, I think absolutely there is a significant role, right? Because we all have a different lens, and we all experience the clinic very differently, in our delivery of care. So,
Mhm.
absolutely. All
And I
right.
think from the medical physics side of things, there's often a lot of discussion about, in parts, relatively small improvements in the quality of care and not necessarily for the larger implications for society in general regarding the environmental impact, or also regarding how many patients would actually be reached by certain developments. So maybe different
Mhm.
aspects of that need to be a bigger part of our conversation.
Yeah, yeah, and we found a way to basically take the emissions, and say, how does this impact qualities, or quality of life, yearly life. Um, so I think, thinking about this is a very good question. Thinking about how do we put this into metrics and tracking, and is there some sort of right standardization? And oftentimes we talk about the carrot or the stick, and so can this be put into some sort of process, right? Whether it is a carrot or like a reward. I think we're probably far away from putting it into a stick, like a mandatory model, where a clinic gets in trouble for this. But in the US, actually, we got very close about 3 years ago with some of federal regulations putting this in terms of reimbursement. Um, so, I think it's a significant opportunity where this needs to kind of sort of be sorted out across all fields. And oncology has been very engaged, especially radiation oncology. And we're a small field, but why can't we lead and answer some of these big questions?
Mhm. Yeah, no, completely agreed. And we are right on
Yeah,
time. And I like that it's quite an optimistic note to end on. So I think I'll call it here. But
yeah,
thank you so much for that
great.
really, really interesting presentation. I think it's really unique kind of work that is an aspect of radiotherapy that we don't think about a lot, but that we really
But we
should think
could.
about more often. And I hope a
Yeah,
lot of people do so in the future.
absolutely. Thank you for having me. And feel free, anyone, to reach out.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
Thanks
Have
so
a good
much for
day.
taking the time.
Yep. Bye-bye.
And bye. And with that, I'm afraid we'll have to wrap up, but I'm very grateful to our speakers for presenting today and taking our questions. PTCOG ECR webinars will continue on May 28th, when Dr. Min-Chul Han from Yonsei University College of Medicine and Dr. Takahiro Uike from Gunma University will discuss heavy ion therapy in Asia. We hope you will join us again then, and we will share a reminder via LinkedIn and email closer to the date. But for now, I want to thank all of you for taking the time today and in the name of the PTCOG ECR subcommittee, I wish you all a nice rest of the week, and we hope to see you again soon. Bye, everyone.